After months of speculation, President Trump has made it official. His chief of staff, John Kelly, will be leaving the White House by the end of the year. The question now is, of course, who will be the next chief of staff? So here to discuss, Brad Blakeman, former deputy assistant to George W. Bush. So, Brad, thanks for coming on. And I want to start with an op-ed that you just wrote in The Hill. You essentially made the case that now is the perfect time for John Kelly to exit. Why?
Because I think the president now has to look beyond 2019 to 2020. Shortly after January, he's going to have to gear up in the campaign mode. He's going to already start his campaign staffing. We've seen people leaving the White House, going to the campaign. This is a much different transition now in 2019. The president not only has to govern, but he also has to think of his own political future and get moving on fundraising and as well as appearances for 2020.
On Fox News Sunday, Larry Kudlow, the president's top economic advisor, he was asked, which is it? Did Kelly resign or was he forced out? And he said, to be perfectly honest, I don't know. What do you think it is?
I think, well, I know, service to the president is an opportunity, not a career. The average tenure of somebody who serves in a senior capacity in the West Wing is between 12 and 24 months. General Kelly is right in that sweet spot. This is the perfect time for him to transition because we are moving into a more political job for a chief of staff. You have to manage a lot of things, but most importantly, you need to, I think, have more political chops than General Kelly had because he was a military guy. So I wouldn't read too much into it. I think the timing is perfect, and General Kelly has done a terrific job as chief of staff to date, and it's not unusual for him to move on.
Today on all the Sunday shows, there were Republicans and Democrats on, and, by and large, most of them were very supportive of John Kelly. I want to play just a little clip from both a Republican and a Democratic senator. Listen to this.
I imagine that he was one of the people that was attempting to convince the president not to fire Mueller. With his departure, certainly depending on who replaces him, our concerns that Mueller may be on the chopping block are, I think, more serious.
I'm a huge John Kelly fan. He's hard to replace, there's no doubt about it, but hopefully it'll be someone just as qualified, just as strong.
And, of course, that segues perfectly into who his next chief of staff is going to be. There's been so much talk that it's going to be Nick Ayers, the vice president's chief of staff. If that does indeed turn out to be true, either on a full term or an interim basis, what sort of chief of staff do you think that he would be?
I think he'd be fine. The president needs somebody who has his confidence. The chief of staff needs to be a quarterback for the president's team. He needs to be somebody who can manage well. He needs to be somebody who can run the president's schedule. The coin of the realm of a president is his time. If you want to see the president, you never will. If you need to see the president, you always will. That's basically the chief of staff's job, is to make sure that the president is using his time as best he can. But we have now a divided government. The new chief has to work with that. He has to work with investigations. He has to work with an international agenda, a domestic agenda, a political agenda. There's a lot on the plate of a chief of staff.
Well, and speaking of political agenda, this next chief of staff is going to have something that John Kelly did not have to deal with, and that is a House that's controlled by the Democrats. Absolutely. How does that change the job?
It requires more of the president's time in trying to get his agenda through with a Democratic House. So there's going to be a lot of outreach, there's going to be a lot of negotiation, and that will require the chief to personally make the investment of his time or her time in making sure the president's agenda stays on track. The competing interests, whether it's domestic agenda, international agenda, political, is the balancing act for a chief of staff. How do you balance all those and not have any one overtake the other?
So really quick, I'm going to put you on the spot. You said that you believe that there's going to be some more White House departures before the end of the year. Who do you think it's going to be?
I don't know who it's going to be, but I will tell you this, that this is the time where you'll be asked either to stay or to go. And this is the perfect time, because as we move into 2019, the president has to have a team that is dedicated through 2020.
Well, Brad Blakeman, you beat my previous guest by getting a football analogy and not just baseball. We appreciate it. Thanks, Brad.